Hello, America, and good day to our friends around the world. This is a political talk show here on WRMN. WRMN 1410 on that AM dial. And of course, WRMN1410.com, where we're simulcasting live. You can listen not only on that AM dial, you can also listen on the live stream. Find the links there for both audio and video. YouTube archives all of the live streams as well, where you can find playlists of all the different shows that are on WRMN, including this one right here, the one you're listening to. If you want notifications of when we go live or when we post that video, well, while you're over there on YouTube, hit that subscribe. It's free, 100% free on YouTube. Hit the bell, and that bell will notify you. All free. So you'll know all about when shows like this start, or community events are happening, or we've got special interest interviews, all kinds of different things that you can follow with that digital archive right there on YouTube. Most of the shows are podcasted as well. Here coming up, I believe YouTube is going to start podcasting everything. We're definitely going to start that come the first of the year. Start actually podcasting all of the shows as audio. And then that way you can follow your favorite shows from there. Also part of the new push for our media as well, we want to make sure that you can get involved with the individual shows themselves. We're going to start branching out and getting some new social media pages for each of the shows. That way you can interact directly with those hosts and stay self-contained. Maybe you like the morning show and you don't want so much of the politics or anything else. Well, obviously follow WRMN on all of the different social media platforms. But also, what you're able to do is follow the individual show. So stick around. We've got all kinds of new goodies just for you. Santa is coming early here at WRMN. My name is Dennis Green. I am the host and moderator of a political talk show where we try to break down more of the objective side of politics. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of subjective side. There's a lot of, well, I did this and my grandpappy fought that and we have always believed this. There's a lot of that subjective type of feelings and anecdotes in politics. And they're supposed to be there. They're supposed to be a representation of you and who you are. That's why we get into these different things for politics. But we all have to play by the same rules. I don't care how fast your car can go. I don't care what color your car can go. I don't care if it's a car or a motorcycle. But the speed limit's still the same. I still drive on the right side of the road. I still obey the traffic laws. We still objectively participate in society because of the rules. Now, as far as the individual side of it, okay, sure, you want to have the freedom of having a super fast car. Awesome. Well, I mean, good luck finding a road that you can drive it on. And that's kind of what laws are meant to really be, is not necessarily a restriction on freedom. Like, if we can do something, we will make a space to allow it. If you want to drive fast in a fast car, we will make a racetrack for you. Having that option is part of the freedom here in America. And as far as the Republican side of it, with again, I have to argue people constantly that is what I am. I do believe that a republic is the best form of government. Democracy, yeah, okay, it's nice until you're the minority for everything. And as far as libertarianism, okay, liberals have their own side of non-interference by the government, do whatever you want to, et cetera, et cetera. But then I ask, okay, Which side of the road do you drive on? And everybody backs off. Oh, okay, well, we do need some stuff. Okay, well, if we do need some stuff, how would you like to interact with it? Well, I would like a say. Oh, okay. So the Republican standpoint of freedom and liberty is laws and government that is non-arbitrary domination. You can tell me how fast I need to go on the road. You can tell me which side to drive on. But I'm going to make sure that I have a voice in saying that. Hey, you know what? City council, maybe this area over here, we should raise it up a couple of speed limit over here. And my yard over here is private. It is a one-way road, so I don't need to worry about which side I drive on. So there are cutouts, there are things for that. And that's where I think we start to lose everybody when we talk about the United States. When we talk about the republic for which it stands, right? The one nation here. And so I'm not here to tell you to be a Republican, to be a Democrat, to be a libertarian, to be left, to be right, to be conservative, to be liberal, I'm not here to tell you any of those things. I'm here to open up the discussion for speed limits. Open up the discussion of what side of the road do we drive on. Open up the discussion of what have we already established, what do we want to get to, and how do we do that? That's all objective things. Subjective stuff, yeah, maybe the horizon, right, of perfection and the shining city on the hill, and what does it look like for a society personally for me? Okay, sure. Chase perfection. Perfection is just a horizon. It's just a direction that you travel down. It's when we forget that we are in this republic together, and it's together. United. We tribalize our politics, and we us and them, and they're bad and we're good and evil and righteous. All of these other things. But we forget that we're American. And it's easy to forget that we're American when people muddy what it means to be an American. And when I say that, you know it, you feel it, you're like, oh, this is what I believe is what it feels to be an American. And this is why we have the republic that we built, the Constitution that we put together to support and defend, as some of us have taken that oath to do. And so this is what we try to do here on the show. And sometimes it seems like we beat up on one side over another, or we just look at the negative, or we can't get through anything because we're just beside ourselves in anger about some issue or that thing over there. And it gets to that point. But we need to have that discussion, not that anger, not that shaking of our fists, not that 5 minutes of hate. Come back together. Realize that we're all Americans. We all live here, and we all want to stay warm this season. We all want to feed ourselves and those around us. We all want to contribute back to the society. It's part of it. Even if you think that somebody who's lazy and just sits in a basement and does whatever for everything else, depression or lack of motivation or anything like that, in the hierarchy of needs, that person still needs community. And given the opportunity to participate in the community, the actual opportunity, not the invite, not the, hey, why don't you come over? this is what we're doing. This is what you can do. This is the opportunity to help somebody else. Here's a face to the people you're helping. Most people take that opportunity. Yeah, am I playing the probabilistic side of humanity? Sure. But aren't we all? And we have to lean into, we're all one community. We're all one America. And not divide ourselves in this subjective feeling tribalism type of side completely. Yeah, you say, I thought I was going to tell you not to. Look, everybody's got friends. I've got friends. You've got friends. I've got different shows that I like versus shows that you like. We are biased. But don't let our bias of liking Westerns hate the people that like sci-fi. We can have our biases. We can have our differences. But at the end of the day, to continue on the same metaphor, we all like movies. We're all American. We're all part of this grand, great, continuous experiment of freedom that we have here. And so it may seem, again, like we beat up on one side or that side or this side, but facts are inherently objective. And that's where we want to come from on this. So in today's discussion, we're going to talk about something that we kind of carried over from last week when we talked about the the video about the not obeying unlawful orders. Yeah, I think the double negative, it's an odd side to it. But essentially, the duty of a service member to not obey an order against the Constitution. And we talked about the service member's perspective from it. And now, in more light, in more things, and more stuff coming out from the Washington Post, and more allegations that are coming out, we're not only going to look at it from the service member's perspective. Now what we're going to do is take it out even further. We looked at the person that actually has to make that decision right there and then. Now we are going to look at what does it mean on the international side. When they say international waters, the high seas, armed conflict versus peacetime, war crimes versus murder versus 60-day limits and 48 hours and all of the different things that are in there. And we're going to talk about those. So stick around. Just like in true apolitical talk show fashion, we are going to make sure that we know the objective side to things. Before we point out the speeding, and before we say, hey, that fast car over there went too fast and dangerous and all of this other stuff, let's look at what the speed limit is. Oh, they drove on the wrong side. They were swerving all around. Okay, well, let's look at what side of the road? Was it a police car? We can say all day things are too fast. Your mom can tell you all day that your music is too loud. But when you pull out the decibel meter and you measure it, that is when you finally have an objective fact. And say, it may appear fast. It may sound loud. But here's the speed limit. Here's the decibel level. And here's the tape measure. all of these different things are the objective side to it. We'll leave the other squabbling of feelings and moralities and all of the other things to the other arguments that we can have around the kitchen table. But let's talk about what actually concretely is. And so, to not spoil it too much, what we are worried about right now is if this was a war crime or if this was just a flat-out murder. And that's where the War Powers Act and all of the other things come into it. But my problem with all of this is that if these allegations are true of the stuff that came out, which may be why they were so angry about the video, this may be something we shouldn't be arguing about at all from our government. Stick around. More Apolitical Talk Show coming up after this. Now available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com is the book called DUI Jury Trial, which is the true story of a truck driver in Illinois who was charged with driving under the influence of alcohol. Not only was he facing a revocation of his driver's license, but also a lifetime disqualification of his CDL, which would prevent him from ever driving a semi-truck again. This book includes backstories of the truck driver, the lawyers that defended the case, and the DUI expert witness who analyzed the case and then testified at trial as to the proper protocol procedures of the field sobriety tests as well as the breathalyzer test. This nonfiction novel also includes the actual court transcript from the jury trial, a courtroom showdown in which the final verdict would determine the fate of the defendant's livelihood. The book DUI Jury Trial is now available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers. So we build specially adapted homes at Homes for Our Troops. And thanks to our donors and supporters, this life-changing gift of freedom is provided mortgage-free to these veterans. But we need you to join us too in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Welcome back to Apolitical Talk Show on WRMN. My name is Dennis Sonar Green, host and moderator. I like being the moderator better. Host of the show, okay, sure, yeah, it's me. I tell you some stuff, we talk about some things, but at the end of the day, Free Speech Friday, best day of the week to come and listen to us. David Tease is going to be on with us again this week. I'm trying to rope in Cecilia Brooks as well. And because of all the legal talk that's here, I know he's not necessarily an international law esquire or lawyer, but probably James Vaselli, if we can get him in here, will come and talk on Free Speech Friday. So stick around. We've got some other Free Speech Fridays I think are floating around the YouTube land as well. We try to play a game, which always is a fun time to do, where we'll either ask, hey, what's in the Constitution, or one of my favorite is misappropriated quotes, quotes that people think somebody else has said that isn't necessarily the case. So there's a few things that are in there in the works, so we'll see what we're doing on Friday. So why am I don't know, a bit more qualified to talk about international waters and the conflict for different things like that? Well, I've sailed quite a bit. I believe in total, I have probably spent 18 months in my 5 years of being on the ship. Well, being in the Navy, rather. First 18 months, you're not really on a ship. You're mostly training, or at least I was. And so I spent a lot of time out in international waters. And when you're out there, you think about it, right? You're out there in either in the desert or in the field or in theater or whatever the wartime area is, and you think about it. You think about your own mortality or et cetera, not to get too dramatic or melancholy about the whole thing. But you think about what would happen if you did fall overboard. What would happen if the ship did sink? You run drills for it. What happens if the ship does take a hit? And you worry and you hear about all of the different wrecks that happened before yours, all the different conflicts that happened before you got in. And you lean on the rules. You lean on the assumption that everybody who's out here in international waters doesn't really want to fight. You lean out there in international waters that if we were in trouble, someone would come and save us on the high seas. Because that's what you do. When there's an SOS, when there is a signal, when there is something that you know that there is somebody who is shipwrecked out there, you rescue them. It doesn't matter who they are. And even me, as a sailor, I knew that if even in an armed conflict, that if my ship was incapacitated, that my ship was going down, that we were shipwrecked and were no longer combatants, that we would stop being targets, that we would no longer be susceptible to the gunfire, susceptible to another missile, susceptible to this double tap. And when we break that ourselves, we put our service members at risk of that as well. Stick around. We're going to dive deeper into conflict in international waters. We're going to talk about the UNCLOS, human rights law, and other different things that are in here. We'll even dive into the Department of Defense's operational manual. Stick around. More Apolitical Talk Show coming up. WRMN, straight from the Kane County Sheriff's Office. Press release earlier. Snow is not yet finished in our area just yet for December 1st. This morning brought pockets of shallow freezing fog outside of Chicago, and conditions will continue to evolve throughout the day. Beginning this afternoon, as we saw, accumulating snow will spread from west to east across Kane County and persist through the evening before tapering off after midnight. This will significantly impact the afternoon and evening commute, creating hazardous travel conditions. Please plan extra time and drive with caution. Looking ahead to this week, it is expected to feature an active winter pattern. We're expecting an additional chance of accumulating snow on Wednesday and Friday. The coldest air of the season is expected to arrive on Wednesday and continue through Thursday. Overnight lows below zero, with wind chills dipping as low as negative 15. Kane County residents are encouraged to remain weather aware, check roadway conditions before traveling, and take precautions for the dangerous cold ahead. Kane County Health Department also has a comprehensive list of warming shelters throughout Kane County located at Kane Health at las.org/insights. You can find more that is there. Head on over to the Kane County Sheriff's Office Facebook page to see a full weather report there, along with maps and additional details of those temperatures. So head on over there if you are interested in more of that. But that is from the Kane County Sheriff's Office. So we're going to talk a little bit more about our international waters side. And I've been to a couple different places, international waters, mostly in the Atlantic. I've been down to the Caribbean, mostly to sail and then not really stop anywhere. But the Atlantic, and then also off the coast of Somalia, and then the Persian Gulf as well, which makes me a warfighter, which isn't just a veteran, which all veterans served and all veterans gave something for their sacrifice. Warfighters actually were in theater at some point. A war veteran actually saw the enemy or at least that area. Now, Somalia, I didn't get any of that. It was mostly just an operation we were doing off of there. And we were doing a lot of what you suspect is happening in the Caribbean, however you want to say it. But we were off the coast of Somalia, that we were tracking Somali pirates. We were finding vessels that we thought were pirates of some sort, whether smuggling something or possibly moving weapons or troops to one side or the other in Somalia. And so we would get the information, we would track them, we would then pull up alongside them, we would call them up, we would board them, do our investigation, and most of the time, we would just turn around, give them some food that we had sitting around, and then went back onto our ship. And yes, there were times where we had to confiscate people or things or all of the other stuff that you shouldn't have out there. And we held them and turned them over. That's the process. Because these people are not imminent threats, right? Even when we pulled up alongside them, we still made sure that our small caliber action team manned the railings to make sure, even if they had their own weapons, small caliber or otherwise, that we would immediately be able to see the imminent threat and handle that imminent threat. We weren't miles and miles away from them. And we didn't just drop armaments because we were not at war. Yes, war on terror, global war on terror, that is what I am a veteran of. That is what I am a war veteran of. The global war on terror. But this is a peacetime law enforcement operation. When you're running down smugglers, or you're investigating international waters means the area of sea beyond any state's territorial sea. Legally, the high seas, under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the UNCLOS. We'll talk about a lot of that. Territorial sea extends up to 12 nautical miles off the coast. And that's a state's baseline. And by state, they don't mean like Georgia or, You know what I mean? They don't mean like state. They mean state as in a government, a recognized country. The state has sovereignty of 12 nautical miles. Beyond that, there may be a contiguous zone up to 24 nautical miles and an exclusive economic zone up to 200 nautical miles, where the coastal state has resource rights but not full sovereignty over navigation. It's still able to traverse it and still able to enter that area, but maybe there's gold or something else that might be off of the coast of it. The high seas, international waters begin beyond national territorial seas. No state may claim sovereignty over them, and all states enjoy freedom of navigation, overflight, fishing, laying cables and pipelines, etc., all in that international water. The UN Convention on the Laws of the Sea also stresses that the high seas are reserved for peaceful purposes. That's Article 88, if you're trying to pick that up. You can find it at www.un.org, and that would be the LOS, the Laws of the Sea. This means the use of military force there is constrained by UN Charter and other rules, not a free-for-all. Gone are the days of buccaneers and pirates of the Caribbean. The UN Charter has rules. Where the September 2nd strike occurred is a highly trafficked maritime space bordered by Venezuela, Colombia, Central America, and the island states and territories of the greater and lesser. It is crucial for commercial shipping, energy movements, fisheries, and notoriously drug trafficking routes from northern South America to North America and Europe. Yes, we know it is a drug trafficking route. All seas are drug trafficking routes. The use of force, peacetime versus wartime. Here is where we split it between a war crime versus a extrajudicial killing or murder is what it would be called if I did it. Peacetime law enforcement paradigm governed by the UNCLOS, human rights law, and ordinary criminal law. States can board, inspect, and arrest suspected pirates or drug traffickers under specific treaty regimes. This is the 1988 UN Drug Trafficking Convention, and we'll get into that. Or with flag state consent. Venezuela turns around and says, hey, we've got a problem with drug traffickers. United States, if you run across anybody on a boat that waves the flag of my country, you have the right to arrest them and send them back, please. Part of the 1988 UN Drug Trafficking Convention. This is where the separation becomes, because that first time, the peacetime, the law enforcement paradigm is law enforcement. This is the problem that it seems that we seem to forget, that there is a difference between law enforcement and the military. Armed conflict is way different than law enforcement. I don't understand how our leaders have forgotten that. So here's the other side of armed conflict. The law of armed conflict, the LOAC. Once an armed conflict exists, law of war applies. You can attack lawful military targets, combatants, certain military objectives, but not citizens or people who are hors de combat. That is wounded, detained, shipwrecked, prisoners of war. They are out of combat. And main maritime law of armed conflict sources, Hague Conventions. World War II, there were Japanese sailors who were put to death because they killed shipwrecked sailors. The Geneva Conventions, the San Remo Manual on International Law applicable to armed conflicts at sea of 1994, widely cited restatement of customary law at sea. And even the U.S. Department of Defense Law of War Manual. Don't believe me? You can read it at ogc.osd.mil. And that has the Department of Defense Law of War Manual PDF. You can read it for yourself. Regardless of whether an operation is framed as law enforcement or armed conflict, there is a long-standing rule: you may not intentionally kill shipwrecked survivors who are no longer fighting. International humanitarian law and law of the sea both regard this as unlawful, often a war crime if an armed conflict exists. That exact rule is now central to the September 2nd strike controversy. Under the Geneva Conventions and customary international law, wounded, sick, or shipwrecked persons who are no longer actively taking part in hostilities are hors de combat and must be protected and cared for, not attacked. I talked about my time in international waters. I talked about my time in Somalia. I talked about my time elsewhere. And if I was shipwrecked, I would want the enemy combatant to follow the same rules. Because that is the humanitarian thing to do, the moral thing to do. The San Remo Manual and related commentary emphasize that shipwrecked combatants must be rescued and treated humanely if it is feasible. Look, you want to leave me to the sharks? Leave me to the sharks. But you don't get to drive over or do a second tap and not be called a war criminal. Because deliberately attacking shipwrecked survivors is prohibited and may be prosecuted as a war crime. Even the U.S. Department of Defense Law of War Manual makes this extremely explicit. Commentators quoting it note that the manual offers orders to fire upon the shipwrecked is a textbook example of a clearly illegal order that service members must refuse to obey. Do you think those Congress people that that made that video, do you think maybe they might have known something that we didn't know or we found out because of the Atlantic? Why do you think they were so mad about it? This matters because the allegation in the September 2nd incident is not just that a suspected drug boat was struck, but that a second strike was deliberately ordered to kill 2 survivors clinging to wreckage. The UN Charter, Article 2, Section 4 states, must refrain from the threat or use of force against territorial integrity or political independence of any state. 51 allows force in, quote, self-defense of if an armed attack occurs. This is what they're leaning on, is the self-defense. They blew up the drug runners because the drugs were going to come to America, and you're going to hurt America with those drugs. Article 51 allows force in self-defense if an armed attack occurs, or arguably an imminent armed attack. Remember off the coast of Somalia, while we were talking about that, we made sure that we pulled up to them and aimed guns in case there was an armed attack occurring or an imminent one. Trust me, they are little tiny boats, little bitty boats. They are not going to start a war with big giant boat. Strategic deterrence, we have the upper hand. The law of the sea governs, or rather, I'm sorry, to continue with the U.S. Charter. The U.S. claims that these strikes are self-defense against transnational narco-terrorist threats. Critics argue drug smuggling is not an armed attack. The law of the sea governs freedom of navigation and navigation and enforcement at sea. High seas reserved for peaceful purposes. States can operate against drug trafficking, but use of force still must comply with human rights obligations. And if applicable, the law of armed conflict. In 1988, the UN put together the Drug Trafficking Convention and encouraged states to cooperate in boarding and seizing drug smuggling vessels on the high seas, typically with flag state consent or treaties. It does not give carte blanche for summary execution of suspected smugglers, which again, we haven't even seen that proof. International human rights law and UN practices. The UN human rights experts have already said that U.S. maritime strikes on alleged drug boats in international waters amounts to, quote, extrajudicial executions and violate the right to life because drug trafficking is a crime problem, not an armed conflict. When we come back in the next hour, we're going to talk about Operation Southern Sphere. We've talked about what we can and can't do. We've talked about what is and isn't an extrajudicial, what is and isn't a war crime. Now what we will do is we will break down what happened. We'll break down everything that's happened since September 2nd with that incident. We'll talk about the 83 deaths including one missing that's presumed dead. And we'll not only talk about the 2 survivors that were hit with the second hit on September 2nd, but we'll also talk about the 2 survivors that were repatriated. If these guys are so bad, the worst in the entire world, that we have to blow them up with everybody else who may be aboard, why are we sending them back? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about more here on A Political Talk Show. If you've got something, send a text message over. 505-926-1410. 505-926-1410. We'll talk about more of the laws around armed conflict. We'll talk about the War Powers Act as well. That's that resolution back in 1973. Passed over President Nixon's veto to actually curb unilateral president war making. We'll talk about how the president put a letter into Congress about it. We're just waiting to hear the rest of the story. Stick around. We've got more Apolitical Talk Show here on WRMN. That's WRMN 1410 on that AM dial. And WRMN1410.com. Find us on YouTube, WRMN Radio, best place to go to subscribe and to hit that bell for notifications. I'll see you on the other side. Hello, America, and good day to our friends around the world. This is A Political Talk Show here on WRMN. WRMN 1410 on that AM dial for over 75 years. And WRMN1410.com, where you can see the full schedule, see some bios for some of your favorite hosts, and learn how you can listen, watch, and interact all with WRMN. A few different ways to do that, even right now as you're listening. We're over there on YouTube, broadcasting live, streaming through that. You can head on over to YouTube, youtube.com. You can find us at WRMN Radio. That's the place to go. You can also head on over to WRMN1410.com. And WRMN1410.com has that live stream for the audio, where you can head on over there and listen to that. Go ahead and bookmark it. You can also send us a text, 505-926-1410, 505-926-1410. We got a couple people that are over there. One person, we had Michael Scott hop in for a little bit. Oh, those poor drug people and their small boats defending drug cartels. Wow. Well, I'd like to see some proof. That's the whole point of due process. Not one word on the people dying from drugs. Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. That's why we are enforcing it. Law enforcement. It's so bad that during the war on drugs, we had the UN put the 1988 act about having our military part of this, not just arbitrarily blowing people up. So, by all means, look, if you are in favor of extrajudicial killing, fine. You just are afraid, you just have to be lucky that you're not the one who they deem a terrorist. And I get it. Look, everybody wants a forceful hand, right? Everybody wants to be the guy at the top that just goes, I know what's best for everything. That's fine. If you like having an authoritative type of side, if you are one of those that doesn't like individual freedom, that's what you like. I'm not here to tell you what you believe is wrong or good or anything else. I'm here to tell you what the law is. And I'm here to tell you that if I was a shipwrecked person, I wouldn't want somebody to shoot me as well. And so we talk about poor drug dealers. Okay. Well, let's talk about drug dealers. Let's talk about convicted drug dealers. Shipwrecked druggies. Okay, shipwrecked. Either way, they were a person that were floating out in the middle of the ocean. And we used the entire might of the U.S. military to make sure that they weren't going to make it. The excuse of this was a lethal operation, so we killed the survivors, doesn't work. That's why there are laws against it. That's why there are treaties against it. And so here we go with talking about war crimes, murder, and drugs, and everything else that's out there. Now set this beside the pardon of the former Honduran president, Juan Hernandez. Convicted. Went through the whole trial. Convicted in a U.S. federal court. Not, we've got secret papers. Convicted. Sentenced to 45 years for conspiring to move roughly 400 tons of cocaine into the United States. 400 tons of cocaine. And taking bribes from cartels, including El Chapo. On December 1st, the White House openly defended the president's decision to pardon him, calling the case politically motivated. The trial unfair, despite the fact that the investigation began under Trump's own first administration. And so do I think they did it without evidence? No, I don't think they did it without evidence. I think they had something to support that there was something on that boat. Sure. But do you know what you do with that? You go up to the boat, you board the boat, you arrest the people, and you send them back to wherever they came from in accordance with the law. And we could say all day that blowing people out of the water is part of the law of conflict and everything else that's on there, but it's not. I just spent the last hour reading it. That is the law. Look, if you are vigilante, if you are Judge Dredd, I am the law. If that's the authoritarian side of you, then okay. That's what you believe, but here is the law, here are the facts. Do we hate drug dealers? Yes. We don't like drug dealers. We don't like the massive amounts of fentanyl that are coming in here. So you send them back so they can do operations again? Sure. Then what happened to the two guys that they sent back? This is the problem, is you want to take the administration's word for it. And you want to say these are the worst people in the entire world. And if they are the worst people in the entire world, why did they do this for two people and shoot another two people? Okay, fine. Let's forget let's say that these extrajudicial killings aren't, that they are right, that they are justified. Okay, what about the double tap that is 100% against any maritime law? What you're going to say is that the operation was lethal and it needed to stay lethal? Again, the Department of Defense manual says specifically not to fire upon shipwrecked individuals. Where's the justification in that then? And so, look, I understand your sentiment. I understand drug dealer bad, drug dealer need to stop. I understand that. But this is not the way to do it. Even the Coast Guard, who regularly stops drug trafficking, they mess up 25% of the time. This is why you do not just explode other vessels on the ocean. Because what's to stop the next country from blowing up our stuff? And going, we had to attack the Americans because they're attacking everybody else. But you want to live in the drug lord's bad, and everybody who's in that area's drug lord needs stop. Shooty, shooty, blowy uppy. So again, we talk about all of these things, and you want to say that by all means, all of your arguments would be the arguments that the administration has given you. But the administration contradicts itself so much that you cannot hold it still. Well, we're at war. Okay, go before Congress and ask for Congress to grant war, to declare it. Oh no, well we can't do that. Okay. These are drug dealers that we need to shoot and blow up. Okay, where's the evidence of such? So self-defense. That is the thinnest self-defense in the entire world. And that is where we have these laws put in place. And again, I'm not going to turn around and not understand where people come from with this. I'm not going to, because I understand it. I understand the sentiment of there are drug dealers. I understand the sentiment of bad people. I understand all of the other things that are there. I'm not as inclined for the capital punishment that you seem to be, but it's okay. We all fall on different spectrums with everything that's here. Again, like I started at the very beginning of the show today, we need to look at the objective facts. Not the feelings, not the, oh, I really want it to be true. The objective facts are they have not proven who any of these people are. They have now kicked the blame through 3 different people for this order. And even at the end of the day, even if the strikes are legal, shooting shipwrecked individuals is never. And so if this whole thing is how terrible and menacing these drug dealers are and how gruesome it is and how much fentanyl and drugs are being poured into the United States, then why pardon someone who was convicted of moving roughly 400 tons of cocaine? If that's the thing, if that's what we're all doing here, that's the reason, that's the moral high ground that we want to stand upon, is drug dealers bad, why pardon? So at sea, low-level alleged smugglers, possibly ordinary fishermen, are killed without trial. And on land, a head of state who helped create a cocaine superhighway receives clemency. These two things contradict each other. And if you say, okay, well, what are we supposed to just get them and then just drop them off? Yes. They did that for two others. I told you I'd talk about the War Powers Act. And so all the way back in 1973, the War Powers Act, called War Powers Resolution of 1973, was passed over Nixon's veto to curb the unilateral presidential war making. It does three big things. Consultation. The president must, in every possible instance, consult Congress before introducing U.S. forces into hostilities or situations where hostilities are imminent. With every possible instance, they are to consult Congress, not inform them, consult. Reporting within 48 hours. Once forces are introduced, quote, hostilities or situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated, or the territory, airspace, or waters of a foreign nation while equipped for combat, the president must send a report to Congress within 48 hours. What that does is it starts a 60-day clock. This is the third thing that the War Powers Resolution of 1973 put together. The 60-day clock. Within 60 days of that report, plus a 30-day withdrawal period, U.S. forces must be withdrawn unless Congress declares war, passes a specific authorization for use of force, or extends that time period. In practice, presidents often file reports consistent with the War Powers Resolution without admitting that the 60-day clock has been triggered. And Congress rarely forces the issue. For something like maritime strike on a suspected drug boat in the Caribbean, war powers questions are: did the president introduce U.S. forces into hostilities when ordering a missile attack and follow-on strike? Was the war powers report submitted under Section 4A1, thus starting the 60-day clock? And does characterizing the campaign as a limited use of force against narco-terrorists avoid the claim that this is war requiring congressional authorization? Reporting practice around these strikes mostly classified or opaque. Public documents show at least some classified notifications and briefings to Congress, and the White House insists the campaign falls short of war, requiring new authorization, relying instead on Article 2, self-defense and protection of U.S. interests, and the DOJ Office of Legal Counsel's memo. And we're talking about this because it came out into the Atlantic, I believe, that on September 2nd, after the initial firing and sinking of one of these boats, there was a second strike on the shipwreck survivors. That is what has been alleged. And now it finally is at a boiling point of, is this a war or is this a conflict? And that's the difference. I don't know why it's hard to understand, but I'll lay it out again. And you talk about the National Guard or the Marines or sending in troops or any of the other things that we've done. There is a difference between law enforcement and military operations. Please, if you don't take anything else away from this episode today, know that there is a difference between those two. There is a difference between those people, officers and soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, spacemen, all the different sides. Officers and public service officers and military members are not the same. There's not the same training. Warlords and soldiers of the other side of a conflict are not the same as drug dealers and other people that break the law. Please understand these differences, because without these differences, they will be all military. It won't be like, oh, well, we'll soften the military into the public. No, it will all be military. And again, I understand that some of you out there love authoritarianism. You love it, and it's okay. It's what you like. You like a strong man as a leader. You want him to make all of the decisions. I get it. It's not my form of government that I prefer. It's definitely not the one I swore an oath to. But that's the way that you feel. If you feel that the executive should be more of a king, then that's on you, not me. I'll tell you what the laws are. It's up to you if you think that our leaders are breaking those laws. If the leaders break the laws, that's not my fault when I point them out. It's okay to have an authoritative side to your politics. I'm not saying it isn't. What I'm saying is no one has the right to break the law. Whether that law be U.S. law, international law, law of armed conflicts, law of the sea, all these different sides. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. We're going to take the what we know about the September 2nd strike on the survivors, and we'll talk about the background of Operation Southern Spear. This is the 2025 campaign. Since September, and we'll talk about all the different strikes. Well, maybe not go into detail, but we'll talk about the 23 strikes on 22 vessels and the 83 deaths, with only 2 survivors reported that were then later repatriated. Stick around. We've got more Apolitical Talk Show coming up after this. Love the discussion. Hop on over to YouTube. Join with us as well. Hey, Brennan, it's good to see you there, man. Stick around. Derek Geyer's up next at the top of the hour. Big Top Sports coming up. To Apolitical Talk Show here on WRMN. Things are heating up a little bit over there on YouTube. Appreciate that. Got another one over here. Jeff asking everybody how their Thanksgiving was going. Brendan said he saw a ambulance in South Elgin this morning. Sorry. Here we go from the comments as well. Mike jumps in. Trump and Hegseth are denying it, but you keep it up with your condemning without evidence. Okay. Allegations, and et cetera, et cetera. I didn't say anything about them specifically. I said it is illegal to do these things and those things. Said it's illegal to blow up people who are survivors. Again, I want to talk about the objective side of things. This is what has been reported. This is what has been alleged. And the things that I've seen here about this are the same things that are in public view of everybody else. And so let's get into it a little bit over here, because we got to talk about let's talk about what's happening then. What we can prove, what we can't prove, what's been out there, etc. Because again, I don't want to just sit here and tell everybody how terrible America is. I don't like doing that. I like saying the other thing. We're the best. I like saying that all the time. So, Operation Southern Spear. Since September 2025, the Trump administration has conducted air and missile strikes against small boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, framing this as part of a, quote, war on cartels. Well, depends on who they're talking to when they say war, but let's continue. And this is Operation Southern Spear. Targets are described as narco-terrorists associated with a Venezuelan gang, Tren de Agua, and other groups allegedly moving drugs towards the U.S. Allegedly. See, even then, it's alleged that these people are even doing things. How dare they blow these people up with just alleged stuff? I'm just a guy on the radio. Again, complaining with no evidence. You're absolutely right. As of mid-November, early December, around 21 to 23 strikes on about 22 vessels. Again, things that can be reported. Reported 83 deaths, including 1 missing, presumed dead, and 2 survivors reported and later repatriated. Human rights groups, UN experts, and many legal scholars argue the entire campaign is unlawful because the U.S. is not in a recognized armed conflict with drug traffickers. 2, many victims appear to be civilians, such as fishers. And 3, lethal force is being used as a first resort rather than apprehension and prosecution. That's what it's supposed to do. So now, this is before we talk about any of the other things. We know that 22 vessels have been killed. It has been reported that 83 deaths have happened. And it is also reported that none of this is authorized by Congress. So, pointing fingers at anybody, this is what is happening. I didn't make any of that up. I didn't speculate any of those things. Things have been blown up. People have died. We have alleged things that, again, Congress has not stepped into until now. On September 2nd, the September strike is the foundational incident, the first acknowledged strike, and the one now alleged to include a double tap on survivors. Here's what we know about September 2nd. This is from multiple outlets: Washington Post, The Time, AP, CNN. If you want me to go deeper into them, I sure can. I'm sure there are more than just these guys. Washington Post and Time come in center. AP leans slightly to the left, and so does CNN. Although CNN's creeping a little bit more center as the days go on. If you really want to talk about a person that's on the far left side of it, that's MSNBC. MSNBC is what people think CNN is. But here, this is from multiple outlets. The attack is generally referred to as September 2nd, 2025 strike, although some Venezuelan sources say the boat was hit on September 1st and the strike announced on September 2nd. That's according to the Washington Post on that one. The location was the Southern Caribbean off the coast of Venezuela near Trinidad and Tobago in international waters. This is high seas or possibly within that overlapping economic zone that we were talking about, that 200 nautical miles of that economic zone, but definitely outside territorial waters. The target was a fast boat, which is a go fast type. That's what a lot of drug dealers use because regular coastal patrols can't keep up with it, like maybe a Navy vessel would be able to, or a missile for that rather. The operation used a U.S. military aircraft and special operations assets. The Washington Post reported identifies the SEAL Team 6, the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, under Joint Special Operations Command, and Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley overseeing from Fort Bragg. According to official statements at the time and later reconstructions, which the press secretary herself said there was a second strike. That's directly from the press secretary herself, that there was a second one, which again is in itself either a war crime, if we are at war, or an extrajudicial killing. Regardless of how many times you want to say it's legal, it's not. According to official statements, President Trump released a 29-second video clip of the initial strike on his social media. He described the target as a boat loaded with narcotics and said 11 Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists aboard were killed under the control of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. That's reported by ABC. U.S. officials said the strike was part of High Seas Interdiction Mission. The boat was reportedly hit with a precision munition that destroyed or set fire to the vessel, killing most of those on board. However, intelligence and later media reports noted that The boat may have been turning away from the U.S. when struck. I mean, if it's an immediate danger that as soon as they plot a course that we're going to have people die in the streets because of the stuff on board, then they turned away. The video released publicly cuts off before showing the alleged follow-on strike, which reportedly killed the survivors. The core allegation surfacing in late November, just a couple days ago, is that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued a verbal order to, quote, kill everybody on the boat, which led to a second strike targeting survivors. Key elements from the Washington Post, The Time, and AP, sources with direct knowledge say Hegseth gave a directive before the operation to kill everybody aboard the suspected drug smuggling vessel. After the first missile strike, drone and other ISR feeds reportedly showed 2 men alive clinging to the debris of the wrecked boat. To comply with the kill everybody instruction, a second missile was fired at the wreckage, killing 2 survivors. Some accounts say the boat was struck a total of 4 times, 2 initial shots to kill the crew, then 2 more to sink the wreck. This second strike, often called a double tap, is the one almost universally described by legal experts as unlawful and potentially a war crime or outright murder, because the victims were shipwrecked and posed no imminent threat, according to the AP. One person who reportedly watched the live feed told the Washington Post that if the video of the follow-on blast were made public, people would be horrified. Initially, the U.S. officials said nothing publicly about a second strike or survivors. As reporting emerged, Pentagon briefing materials described the follow-on strike as intended to, quote, sink the boat and remove a navigation hazard, rather than kill the survivors. That's what they were saying they were doing. The same explanation was apparently given in classified briefings to Congress. Later, investigative reporting and congressional comments have heavily criticized that explanation as implausible or deceptive. Wreckage from one small boat in a vast ocean being a serious hazard. Again, according to the Washington Post. By late November and early December, however, the White House formally confirmed that a second strike took place and has stopped denying that it killed survivors, while still insisting the operation was lawful. So from their own mouths, they have said that they had the second shot. Whether or not you want to look at the bombings of these boats as legal or not legal, killing of survivors is not. It isn't. Ever. Now, those survivors pick up guns, stand on the wreckage, and shoot at you. They're no longer survivors. They're combatants again. Heck, as soon as they pick up a gun, they're a combatant again. But if they are clinging to the wreckage of the boat that you just blew up, you are to rescue them. Here are the key lines from the Trump administration officials. In a December 1st White House press briefing, Leavitt explicitly defended both strikes and confirmed the legal narrative. Quote, the strike conducted on September 2nd was conducted in self-defense to protect Americans and vital United States interests. Quote, the strike was conducted in international waters and in accordance with the law of armed conflict. Leavitt went on to say Admiral Mitch Bradley made the order for the second strike. She went on to say Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law. On the allegation that Hegseth said, kill everybody, she said, I would reject that the Secretary of War ever said that. In the same exchange, she pivoted to presidential authority, adding, the president has made it quite clear that if narco-terrorists are trafficking illegal drugs toward the United States, he has the authority to kill them. And on Congress and the legal basis, she emphasized that lawmakers have had access to the memo and classified material. There have been 13 bipartisan briefings to Congress to review the classified DOJ Office of Legal Counsel opinion and other related documents. Just because you say it over and over again does not make it true. There seems to be a reoccurrence with this broken record system that we're in here. When asked what specific law made it legal for the president or anyone to do that, all that they got back in response about 5 different times was, we did it with accordance to the law. We did it with accordance to the law. Well, which law did you do it in accordance with? Well, we did it very carefully and with accordance to the law. Well, this law over here says this thing. Which law did you say that you did it? Well, it was a strike that happened and it was done with in accordance to the law. No matter how many times you want to say it, you have to eventually show up with the law that says you can. Secretary Hegseth's public line has been a mix of denial of specific kill everybody order and a full-throated defense of the campaign. Time and other outlets quote him as saying the Washington Post story is fabricated and that he never issued an order to kill survivors. In response to the controversy, Secretary has insisted U.S. operations in the Caribbean are lawful under both U.S. and international law. On the overall posture towards the enemies, he went on Fox and on social media. Secretary Hegseth said, Biden coddled terrorists, we kill them. And in another post summarized by reporters, quote, the Trump administration has sealed the border and gone on offense against narco-terrorists. These quotes show how he is framing the strikes as part of a warlike campaign against narco-terrorists, while rejecting the specific accusation he ordered the execution of survivors. The president has tried to support Hegseth politically while distancing himself from the most incendiary details. The president has said on Hegseth's alleged kill order and the second strike, the president said, Pete said he did not order the death of those 2 men, and I believe him. He also said he wouldn't have wanted a second strike on survivors if he had been asked, according to accounts of his remarks. On describing the victims immediately after the strike, early statements of the president said the operation killed 11 Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists aboard the boat, describing it as loaded with drugs headed for the United States. And on the broader campaign, he has repeatedly called it a war on narco-terrorists and cast the strikes as decisive actions to protect Americans from drugs and framing echoed by the OLC memo and administrative talking points. But on the broad spectrum of legal scholars, including former military judge advocates, experts, and human rights lawyers, they have converged on stark assessment. Killing shipwreck survivors is unlawful whether or not an armed conflict exists, and an armed conflict is a war crime, and in peacetime it is extrajudicial killing. Commentators highlighted that the DoD Law of War Manual have stressed that it explicitly lists orders to fire upon the shipwrecked as an example of a clearly illegal order that must be refused. Articles in Time, Just Security, and other venues say that if the allegation is true that senior civilian official ordered a follow-on strike deliberately to kill survivors, he could be liable under the War Crimes Act, the federal criminal law, and or ordinary federal murder statutes if there is no valid armed conflict. The House and the Senate Armed Services Committee, both GOP-led, have announced investigations focusing on who gave what orders, what the rules of engagement were, and whether Congress was fully and truthfully briefed. Members like Senator Mark Kelly, Democrat from Arizona, a former Navy captain, have said that a second strike on survivors seems to be a war crime if reports are accurate. Some representatives who received classified briefings have accused the Pentagon of misleading them by framing the second strike as purely about removing a navigational hazard. The letter from Senators Durbin and Welch and others to the DOJ questioned the legal theory that these people were unlawful combatants in an armed conflict and calls the administration's claims without factual or legal support. If Congress people are asking for the proof, what are we doing here? What proof have they shown anyone if Congress is asking for that proof? The House and Senate Armed Services Committee is asking for that proof. And we have yet to see it since September 2nd. International reaction: Venezuela and other regional governments have condemned the strikes as extrajudicial killings and violations of sovereignty. Venezuelan officials assert that some or all of the 11 killed on September 2nd were civilians, not cartel members. This is the sticky situation with it. Because what if Venezuelan intelligence says that all of our fishing boats are narco-terrorists? This is why we have international laws like this. If you don't like them, change them. But don't pretend like you don't want to just kill people because they're bad.
When your car is making a strange noise, no matter what it